righteousness to make sure that this ends.
The right criticized his response as slow, and Walz himself later acknowledged the, quote, abject failure of that response. In 2023, after his party won control of the Minnesota House and Senate, Walz signed into law a laundry list of Democratic priorities, providing free meals to K-12 students, the largest child tax credit in the country, enshrining abortion rights into state law, increasing LGBTQ protections, legalizing marijuana, and granting voting rights to ex-offenders. His selection by Harris is seen by some as a nod to the party's progressive wing.
Do you think your record is an asset to the ticket, or would it risk fueling Trump's attacks as you being a big government liberal?
What a monster. Kids are eating and having full bellies so they can go learn, and women are making their own healthcare decisions. And we're a top 5 business state, and we also rank in the top 3 of happiness.
But earlier in his career on Capitol Hill, he was known as a moderate.
I intend to come here to Washington to provide authentic leadership.
In 2006, he flipped his Minnesota U.S. House seat from red to blue, becoming the highest-ranking enlisted veteran ever in Congress. Over 6 terms and a dozen years, he ranked among the most bipartisan lawmakers, supported ongoing operations in Iraq while opposing more boots on the ground, pushed for a minimum wage hike and prescription drug cost negotiations, voted against President Obama's 2009 Wall Street bailout plan, but backed the Affordable Care Act. Before entering politics, Walz served 24 years with the Army National Guard, enlisting at the age of 17, alongside his day job teaching high school social studies and coaching football. In recent weeks leading up to his selection, Walz made a name for himself as a willing warrior for Harris. Are you what this ticket needs to be able to beat the Trump-Vance ticket?
Well, I don't know about that, Omna, but what I can tell you is that we will beat that ticket. This chaos that Donald Trump brings, this dystopian view of America, Kamala Harris's joy, you can feel it.
Going viral by branding the opposing ticket in this way.
Well, it's true. These guys are just weird.
The Harris-Walz campaign will spend the next week touring swing states, with stops in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, North Carolina, Arizona, and Nevada, as it introduces the country to a new national political player and potential future vice president.
The election is shaping up to be decided on a razor-thin margin. The Cook Political Report's editor-in-chief Amy Walter broke down their latest assessment of the 2024 race.
Let's talk about your analysis today. You wrote this. You said, quote, things look a lot better for Democrats today than they did a few weeks ago, but Trump is looking stronger now than he did in 2020. Explain that to us. What are you seeing now in the race and in the polling?
That's right. If you think about this from where we were when Biden was in this race, so in the pre-July 21st world, if we think about this as a contest, as a game, the contest was very lopsided against Biden. He was behind by a significant number, not just at the national popular vote, but in those individual states, those individual battleground states. You can see almost 6 points in a state like Georgia and Nevada. Now, just in the time that Harris has been in the race, you've seen those numbers move pretty significantly toward Harris. Shifts in those battleground states, which is mirroring what we're seeing in the national poll as well. It hasn't turned those states, though, from ones that favored Trump to ones that now favor Harris. It just means now that the race is no longer as lopsided in Trump's favor as it was, say, in late July, as it is today, which is why we're calling this race a toss-up.
So we've got 3 months left until the election. What do Harris-Walz or Trump-Vance need to do to really shift this race in their favor? What voters are key to that?
Well, I think the most important thing to talk about is what has happened in the 3 weeks since Kamala Harris got into this contest. If you think about where we were before that, think about Republicans as a football team, and they had every single member of their team on the field. And Democrats were a football team where maybe like 70% of their members were on the field. Now what's happened with Harris, the enthusiasm, the energy, the shots you showed from where she's campaigning in these battleground states means that both teams now have everybody on the field, which means this is a battle of inches, not of yards. They are both lined up. They're evenly matched teams where, it could be anything from a fumble from one side that wins the game to one candidate getting a surge at the end. But I do think, look, the battle right now, it was in your piece that you introduced the show with. It's the battle to define the Harris-Walz ticket. They are not particularly well known. Even the vice president isn't as well known. The one benefit she is getting is, I think a lot of folks assumed because she was the vice president, she would come in that Biden had. Instead, we've seen her favorable numbers shift 10 points in her more favorably than they were before that. She was much more tied to opinions of Biden than she is today. That's the good news for her. But as you can see, Republicans are trying to fill in those gaps themselves, calling her dangerously liberal. They have ads up going after her, specifically on things like the border, but also police reform and her opinions on some of those issues where she moved to the left in some cases during the 2020 campaign. So I think for the next, let's call it more so after the DNC is where she gets a chance to tell her story. After that, it's still Republicans trying to make the case about who they would like voters to see her as.
So, Amy, with Harris now seeing a bump over where President Biden was, what are the down ballot implications for that, especially in some of those Senate races you've talked about before, where we know Democrats are really fighting to hold on in tough states?
Remember when we were watching this dance, is Biden going to stay in, is Biden going to get out? And the number of candidates who started to come out, we saw that number start to ratchet up, especially in some of these states where voters knew that a decreased enthusiasm would mean that they, too, would find fewer voters coming and turning out. Their overall numbers haven't changed. What has changed, I think, is that they feel more confident that the voters they know are already for them will show up. What they were worried about is that the voters who were for the Senate candidates were not excited about Biden, and so they may have stayed home.
And we're seeing the impact of that with some of these Democratic Senate candidates in these battleground states.
Yeah, when we were all at the RNC, and right before that, you had President Biden come into the state of Wisconsin, and not a lot of the folks who were up. Senator Tammy Baldwin, for example, Democrat there, she did not appear with Biden. Candidate in Michigan running for the Senate also didn't want to appear with Biden. They are more than happy to appear with Harris now.
Amy Walter, thanks as always. Great to see you.
Great to see you.
Harris and Walz quickly hit the campaign trail this week as Republican J.D. Vance zeroed in on the Minnesota governor's military service.
Well, thank you very much.
Donald Trump today held his first major campaign event since Vice President Kamala Harris announced her pick of Minnesota Governor Tim Walz as her running mate.
There's certainly never been anybody so liberal like these two.
For nearly 10 minutes, the former president ticked through a litany of now familiar grievances and unfounded and false claims, taking particular issue with the reporter's question about the Harris campaign's crowd sizes.
I have 10 times, 20 times, 30 times the crowd size.
He compared the crowd size of his ellipse speech on January 6th to that of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s famous I Have a Dream speech. And when asked why he's been off the campaign trail for days, offered this.
Because I'm leading by a lot, and because I'm letting their convention go through, and I am campaigning a lot. I'm doing tremendous amounts of taping here. We have commercials that are at a level I don't think that anybody's ever done before. Plus, in certain cases, I see many of you in the room where I'm speaking to you on phones, I'm speaking to radio, I'm speaking to television. Television's coming over here. Excuse me, what are we doing right now? She's not doing any news conference. You know why she's not doing it? Because she can't do a news conference. She doesn't know how to do a news conference. She's not smart enough to do a news conference.
Trump, who previously backed out of a presidential debate with Harris, today proposed 3 new dates for debates, including one with ABC News, to which Harris already committed. Trump today was decidedly less on message than his own running mate, J.D. Vance, who took aim at Walz's military service. reminiscent of the 2004 Republican effort to discredit the war record of then Democratic presidential nominee John Kerry, a tactic orchestrated by Trump's now campaign advisor Chris LaCivita. Vance at his campaign event yesterday used the controversial term stolen valor, often used to describe people who've lied outright about serving in the military.
When the United States of America asked me to go to Iraq to serve my country, I did it. When Tim Walz was asked by his country to go to Iraq, you know what he did? He dropped out of the Army and allowed his unit to go without him.
There is no evidence that Walz retired to avoid a wartime deployment, and it's a line of attack that may not work. Walz has faced similar attacks from Republicans before and during his successful campaigns for Congress and governor.
This guy doesn't know the first thing about unity or service. And his running mate is just as dangerous and backward as he is.
At a United Auto Workers event in Detroit today, Harris and Walz pushed back on the Trump campaign's attacks.
We believe in each other. We believe in the collective. We're not falling for these folks who are trying to divide us, trying to separate us. So, Michigan, I ask you, are you ready to make your voices heard?
Their Michigan event today follows a campaign rally last night outside Detroit that was moved to an airplane hangar to accommodate a crowd of nearly 15,000 people, according to the Harris campaign.
This election is going to be a fight. We like a good fight. When you know what you stand for, you know what to fight for. We know what we stand for.
As Harris emphasized a message of unity, a familiar divide. A small group of protesters chanting what appeared to be a pro-Palestinian message, interrupting Harris's speech. Harris spoke with the leaders of the uncommitted national movement before her rally and acknowledged the protesters at first.
I'm here because we believe in democracy. Everyone's voice matters, but I am speaking now.
But her patience ran thin after repeated interruptions.
You know what? If you want Donald Trump to win, then say that, otherwise I'm speaking.
As the Harris campaign continues its battleground blitz, it's out today with a new ad campaign tailored to Latino voters, emphasizing Harris's background, raised by an immigrant mother.
Since she moved to the top of the ticket, Democrats have leaned into a new line of messaging, namely pointedly calling Trump and Republicans, quote, weird, a new approach first launched by Harris's now VP pick. Our White House correspondent Laura Barone-Lopez has more.
On a fast-track campaign for the White House, Vice President Harris is trying something new, to call it as she sees it.
He and his running mate sure seem to have a lot to say about me. And by the way, don't you find some of their stuff to just be plain weird?
It's a notable change from when President Biden was in the race.
Do you really want to go back to the chaos of Donald Trump as president?
Much of his language focused on Donald Trump as an existential threat to the country.
It's about your freedom. It's about democracy.
Now, campaign press releases call Trump old and quite weird, and Democrats across the board are leaning into Harris's blunt approach. From possible vice presidential picks commenting on Trump's behavior.
Have you ever seen the guy laugh? If he has laughed, it's at someone, not with someone. That is weird behavior.
To leaders of the party addressing resurfaced clips of J.D. Vance.
Every day, Vance, it comes out, Vance has done something more extreme, more weird, more erratic.
Branding the Republicans as creepy has caught on fast.
That's just the start.
In an ad released by a PAC focused on young voters, the conservative playbook Project 2025 is personified as people desperate to control your personal life.
Your genitals are reserved for procreation.
If you freeze 12 eggs, you should be required to have 12 babies, or else you're a serial killer. And I'm definitely not a serial killer.
Are you?
This shift in language is a strategy that could prove effective as Harris rushes to define her opponent in a new way, according to David Karp of George Washington University.
The serious messaging around Donald Trump that this is a threat to democracy if we take him both seriously and literally this time. That's important, but it's also a bummer. And what we're seeing here is a way to talk about this that is still